I remember noticing that people and people's voices around me tended to have colors associated with them. And certain colors would signify danger or safety. I don't know if that was a trauma response or if I was just born with that synesthetic ability. But color became very important even before I was actually making paintings. Okay, my name is Maja Ruznic. We are in Basel, Switzerland, and my exhibition titled Who Tastes Fire and Cannot Speak at Contemporary Fine Arts. It's based on Louise Gluck's poem Day Without Night, and this idea that day and light, which we often associate with goodness, and light itself has positive connotations, but how I think too much emphasis on illumination is actually quite scary. So I think the work sort of suggests in this show that all these things arise from the shadow, from the subconscious, from the dream, where things are slower, movements are slower. There's a sense of dream logic, which perhaps is more interesting to me than things of reason or of logic or illumination.
I guess within your work, there is space left for ambiguity, for things being unresolved or not, even your resistance to categorize in terms of, is this abstraction, is this figuration? There are stories here, but they're not straightforward narratives that you can easily tease out. Thinking about it politically as well, we are kind of often told what to think these days, or we're in one camp or in the other. Yes. And so to be able to embrace the idea that in the shadows, more interesting things happen rather than when everything is harshly lit, feels resonant today, I guess. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on kind of how you see that in relation to, the present that we find ourselves in.
Absolutely, yeah, no, that's great. I love that you connected it to the political landscape. And I think dwelling in the dark or in the shadow or in ambiguity is scary for people because we don't have structures or rituals that make people feel safe in those realms. So there is a lot of pressure to identify what you are, what you think, what you identify with. I just always trust my body when I'm around groups or people like that, whether they're on the left or the right, it almost doesn't matter. My body gets very scared, where there is like a very strong, almost like a fist, like I am this. And I think the work is really my resistance to identify with either, because there is a sense that the extremes are actually where our brains, our minds, and our souls get hijacked. And I think in the space where you're ambiguous, where you're truly living in the binary within that, is I think where mysticism, the esoteric belief can arise that's very personal. I'm hoping that my work will, at least on a subconscious level, awaken the seed where our individuality is the most potent and the most precious and the most important thing we can hold on to, not identifying with a belief system. I think a very steadfast belief in just one thing can take you to the opposite of what you stand for.
I guess a good comparison as well to some of what we're talking about would be, elements that you draw on heavily, like, poetry, music. Talking about the title of the show, or obviously individual works as well, I'm interested in this kind of use of language that comes into your work. But I wonder, what place do you think that these elements of essentially text, words, has in a visual medium of painting?
I love that question so much. I remember reading My Noiseless Entourage by Charles Simic, and reading every poem was like meeting a friend. I felt like I was looking at my own paintings more than when I look at paintings, especially contemporary paintings. So I think for me, in other mediums, like in writing or in poetry or in films, I feel like I can find kindred spirits. When I first started really painting, I was 12 years old. My mom and I fled Bosnia, and we were refugees in Austria. I made myself a little art studio in the back of our kitchen. And I was using a lot of water-based ink and watercolor, and I remember using my breath a lot to guide the pools of water on my paper that would pigment it. And I remember how there was a connection with my interiority, my breath, and what it did on the paper, and the kind of dizziness all formed something that to me felt stronger than language. I had this instinct that my mom couldn't understand what I was going through. Around that time, I must have dealt with depression because after school, I would have to sit in front of a red lamp. All those things together, I think, sort of created a way of relating to color, like the red lamp and my blowing. It was my escape. I realized that what we tried with language is to communicate, which to me feels like to touch another person. And as a kid, I realized you can never do that with language. And so when I started painting and doing my little puddle studies, I felt like I was touching something much greater. The thing that I was touching was much more nourishing back to me than any communication I could have with the friends or even with my own mother. And that, I think, was like the origin of my need to make art.
And you said you don't do preliminary sketches, you're not kind of mapping them out in that way, so it truly is like, these figures are a wolf, a
Yes.
face, more botanical abstract forms, an eye, coming in, coming out, I don't know,
Yes.
they come to you.
Well, it's funny, they don't even come to me, they come to the surface. So I remember when I put in this dog figure, sometimes I just look for an hour, I don't paint. And I think what starts happening, it's a bit of hallucination almost. The colors start vibrating, some pigments start coming forward, some start receding. This dog figure started appearing. So then what I do, I just accentuate it. So sometimes I feel like I'm not a painter, I'm just an accentuator of what's already in the weave of the linen. And I just pull it out. So it's as if the painting just tells me what to do, and I'm very obedient. I just do what it tells me. And that's when they're good. The paintings turn out bad when I don't listen and I just work.
And I mean, you've spoken before about how the different colors that appear in your work represent different moments from your life. And is that connected to that way of very early experience of starting to have colors suggest something, whether that's an emotion or connect then to an experience when you look back? How does that translate within your work specifically?
When we arrived to the first refugee camp, my mom and I, in Austria, I remember noticing that people and people's voices around me tended to have colors associated with them. I think it has something to do with the sheer amount of people I was surrounded by. There were so many of us. That almost caused this sort of like flow of other sensory information. It was more like color that arrived in my own inner eye that I would then start associating with a person. When I started having this intuitive arising of color, it was maybe some kind of confidence that I could trust that as much as I could trust things that are real. It's not rooted in any color theory. It's just my own personal relationship.
You've spoken about the kind of importance of alternative sources of knowledge, going beyond the kind of rational or the objective. And I wonder, you've touched on that a little bit just now, and I'd love to hear more around moving on from childhood to like how that manifests today in not only your work, but in your life. And the two, of course, are intimately connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think so much of my relationship with color and form and the sensitivity, it makes it very difficult for me to be in society sometimes. I find the noise of society, in particular culture, to be very, almost like when you're rubbing styrofoam together, that screeching noise, the squeaky noise, and it really like hurts my body. So if I spend too much time in big cultural hubs, I almost can't wait to go back home so that I can just incubate and get my life force. I think consciousness, it's like this invisible net. And I think artists, mystics, poets, anyone with a sensitive nervous system almost has like a way to quiet the static of the world and grow little antennas that plug into that consciousness, and then they pull things. When I make the best paintings, they feel like I was able to channel something and it came, and my body just became the thing it flew out of. I've tried remaking a palette and I could never do it, and I'm glad because I don't want to be a machine. I think everything about our contemporary moment wants us to be and behave like machines. And I think being an artist is really a radical way to not plug into that. So it's just madness in the studio. Witchcraft.